What is going on, YouTube? It's Jake, aka StarCoding, coming at you with yet another video, but we're talking about computer science. Today, we're talking about object-oriented programming, and more specifically, the access types, private versus public. This video is definitely geared towards people that are just now learning computer science, and maybe want a more just down-to-earth conversation about, what computer science is all about. So, that is what we're aiming to do today. And let's hop in the code. I have some great examples to show you. So here I have opened up Visual Studio Code. As you can see on our main window, we have our text editor with our Java files. On the left-hand side, we have 3 files. And at the bottom, we have a terminal which we're going to use to run the code. So if we break it down, we have 2 banks we're going to use. We're going to have a private bank and we're going to have a public bank. And what I mean by that is that our original bank is using the classical example you might see in school. Remember and recall that when we're making classes, there's 3 main things we need. We need attributes, which are the things that make a class a class. This is the stuff we want to save. There's a constructor, which is how we're going to make the class. And then there's methods, or things that the class can do. So for a bank, guys, this is ultra simple, simplistic. We have a bank with a balance. When we make the bank, we're going to give it an initial balance. And by setting that initial balance, we're setting the bank's overall balance to whatever it is. At the beginning, it's 0, but that is just for syntax. Really, when we make a bank, the bank's balance is just going to be instantiated to whatever value we pass in the constructor. And then we have some methods. We have a getter and a setter. The getter is going to return the balance, which is an int, so that's why its return type is int. And the setter is going to return nothing. I'm setting something. I don't need to return anything, so it can be void. I set it to a new balance, and I'm doing some computation, which we're going to get into in a sec, but essentially the balance is getting set to the new balance in here. So this is our original bank, and in our public bank, this is all we have. We have our attribute balance, which is equal to 0, and we have a constructor, which is initial balance. Cool. You'll notice that there are no methods here, and we're going to jump into that as well. But so we have a typical bank that's using private access types for its attributes, as you can see here. This is the main difference. There's private here, and then there is public here in front of the public bank attribute. I hope you're following along so far. And here, we're going into our main method. For those that don't know, Java requires there to be a main method. That is how the Java program knows where to start. You could imagine just giving the Java compiler and the Java virtual machine a bunch of Java code. It's going to scan through it, but it's not going to start executing until it sees a main method, and that's when it knows where to begin. So we're making a private bank and a public bank. Okay, and we're going to do some things with these banks. You can see that the initial balance is set to 10, and the initial balance is set to 100 here. And so let's just print out what the balance is for these banks. You'll see that for our private bank, we have system.out.println privbank.getBalance. Makes sense. I'm printing out the literal string privbank followed by the getBalance. I hope if everyone's following along, you might be able to guess what we're going to do next. We're going to print out our public bank. And how do you think that is going to take place? Well, we don't need as many things. All we really need to do is call the pubbank.balance. That's all we need. We don't need to call the method getBalance because it doesn't even exist in the public bank. But also realize that it is a public variable, which means I can call it outside the pub bank class. And that is the main thing when it comes to public and private. If for example, I tried to get the balance of PrivBank here, you'll notice that I probably can't even call it. It doesn't even recognize what balance is. Yes, it's taking a guess. This is just Visual Studio Code, like, assuming what the next thing's going to be. But it doesn't really know what balance is. But if I say get balance, it's like, oh yeah, that is a method that returns int. It recognizes it. And that's because I cannot access the balance variable outside of bank. Very cool. So if I compile this code, which we'll do here, we're going to compile our main method, our bank class, and our pub bank class. And then all I need to do is call Java on the main method, which would be in my main Java file. I don't think I saved. Let me do that one more time. And you can see that, bam, we just printed out the two values. That is a main difference between public and private. I can call things in my main method that are public, and I cannot call them when they're private. So logically, this might beg you the question, Jake, why do we even have private variables? I mean, look how simple this is. A public bank. All I needed to do was call the balance. That's all I needed to do. Whereas for my regular bank, I had to make all these getters and setters. Well, you're not wrong. It is a lot of extra work when it comes to making variables private versus public. And there is no wrong answer. It's computer science. You can do what you want with it. But let me just throw in a scenario. It's a bank. I don't think you want your bank's balance to be negative. I mean, maybe you can go in debt in some scenarios. Maybe the bank allows you to go in debt. But in this bank, in Jake's bank, you cannot go in debt. So if the balance is below 0, it should throw an error. It should not ever be below 0. So if we come in here, and if we want to set some variables, let's just change. So now we're going to start changing the variables. You know, I can come over here and I can do privbank dot set balance to 10. Well, I'll do 12. But for the pub bank, I can just get its balance and set that equal to, 102. Just like that. Very cool. And if I come over here, we can just call the balance again. Changing values. And we will compile this and run it. Let me do a quick clear. And you can see we changed the value successfully to 12 and 102. Bam! So simple, so easy. And you can even see again, it was just way easier to change that value on my public bank than it was my private bank. I had to call this method, I had to pass it a parameter, whereas with the public bank, I could just set my balance equal to 102. But the scenario, I don't want to ever be below 0. So now let's do the same thing, but we're going to set it below that 0 mark. So if I can set this to -100, set this to -100, changing values to negative, and let's see what happens. We compile, we run, and we can see that there's a clear difference. That private bank didn't change its value to -100 while the public bank did. What gives? Well, in my setter, in my setter, I had some custom logic implemented to where if this new balance ever was less than 0, new balance has to be greater than 0 in order for balance to get set to the new balance, or else it's going to throw an error, which it did. It said can't set balance to negative. That is what is very cool about public and private access types. It might seem very intuitive on the surface right now, because I could just simply, have an if statement right here that says if the new value is greater than 100, blah, blah, blah. But let's just think for a second, if I'm on a banking website, if I'm on some website and there's like input fields that you have control over, that the end user has control over, I could type in, that -10, that -100, click submit. What's going to happen? Probably not set your balance to negative. There's probably, the logic in place to do it. You can put that logic anywhere you want. Like I said, it's computer science. You can do with it what you want. If it's possible to code, if it is possible, it's possible to code, is the motto. But we can make our code look pretty. We can abstract our code, encapsulate our code to where there doesn't need to be this goofy if logic in my main method. When I set a balance, I am writing the line of code to set balance. Whatever custom logic needs to get implemented in place can be all wrapped up in this one set balance method. It makes your life easier as a programmer to, when you have like 100 files, you can look in one place for that logic that's about setting balance, besides scrambling in your main method, scrambling wherever that logic might be. So by, having this public access type, you're kind of just leaving your variable out in the wild to be whatever value the end user wants it to be. If it's public, you can do anything with it. If it's private, you can set boundaries in place to stop things from happening, is what I would summarize it as. So, yes, pros for public is that it's very intuitive to use. It's very easy. But don't fall into that trap, because when we make something private, we're really harnessing the power of the class to do stuff with those variables. I hope that made sense. So yeah, guys, it's going to wrap up this video about object-oriented programming and public versus private variables. I know that was a lot, but I hope you got the gist. There is no right answer. There's never a right answer when it comes to computer science and that stuff. It's kind of abstract, but there is a good way and there's a better way of programming that makes it easier for yourself, as well as maybe someone that is going to use it or read it in the future. And by all means, use private access types when you're making your classes, and use those getters and setters to get the object and set whatever value needs to get set. Alright, that's going to do it, guys. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Leave comments below if you have any questions. Peace.